Welcome to the Bible Study Channel. This is the Systematic Theology of the Daily Office for August 22, 2026, the Memory of Mercy. What happens when mercy has been shown, but fear can't believe it will last? Joseph's brothers have lived under his protection for years. Once their father dies, they expect revenge. The disciples have watched Jesus feed two crowds. One forgotten supply of bread leaves them unable to hear his warning clearly. Today's readings treat memory as part of faith. Psalm 124 teaches a rescued people to say who broke the snare, while the companion song, Psalm 138, remembers steadfast love in the middle of trouble. Ezekiel looks beyond ruined cities to cleansing, a new heart, and life restored by God. Remembered mercy names evil and danger without granting them final authority. It teaches us to trust God's purpose and to notice when religious teaching bends our vision away from Christ. The semi-continuous track opens with Psalm 124. Israel recalls floodwater, teeth, and a bird escaping a broken snare. Genesis chapter 50 then brings Joseph's brothers before the ruler they once sold. Joseph speaks of human evil, divine purpose, forgiveness, and God's future visitation. The complementary track begins with Psalm 138. The high God regards the lowly, preserves life in trouble, and completes his work. Ezekiel chapter 36 moves from desolation to cultivated land, rebuilt cities, and crowds compared with festival flocks in Jerusalem. Both tracks meet in Matthew chapter 16. The disciples worry about bread while Jesus warns about leaven. He makes them remember the loaves before they can understand the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Joseph's answer in Genesis 50 speaks about providence through two intentions in one event. He tells his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive." The Hebrew uses the same verb for both intentions. The brothers aimed at harm. God ordered that same history toward preservation. The moral difference remains sharp. Joseph doesn't call the sale, the false report, or the years of grief good. He calls their purpose evil. God's sovereignty doesn't dissolve human agency, and human guilt doesn't leave God helpless before what people do. Christian traditions disagree about how best to describe this concurrence. The text gives us firm boundaries even where later systems differ. God isn't another agent of evil, and evil never becomes holy by producing an outcome we welcome. Yet evil intention doesn't control history's end. The God who preserved life through Joseph can bring saving good from what his creatures meant for ruin. The brothers assumed that Jacob's life was the barrier holding Joseph back. Their message reports a final command from their father, though the narrator never tells us whether Jacob actually said it. Joseph weeps when he hears them. They still find retaliation easier to believe than mercy. Joseph asks, "Am I in the place of God?" He has political power, but he refuses the throne of final judgment. That refusal doesn't make the brothers innocent. It keeps Joseph from treating personal vengeance as divine justice. His forgiveness takes material form. He promises to provide for them and their little ones, then comforts them and speaks to their hearts. Romans chapter 12 gives the same shape to Christian ethics: leave vengeance to God and overcome evil with good. Mercy remembers the wrong without claiming God's throne. It gives judgment back to God and seeks the neighbor's life. Joseph's protection can't be Israel's permanent hope because Joseph dies. His last words turn the family away from his office and toward God's oath. "God will surely visit you," he says, "and bring you up out of this land." The doubled Hebrew form gives the promise emphasis. God will attend to his people. Joseph makes Israel swear to carry his bones when that day comes. His coffin remains in Egypt as a visible refusal to call Egypt the promised home. Exodus chapter 13 records Moses taking those bones. Joshua chapter 24 places them in the land. Hebrews chapter 11 remembers the command as an act of faith. Biblical memory therefore faces forward as well as backward. It recalls a promise so the next generation can recognize its fulfillment. Joseph can die without surrendering hope because covenant faithfulness belongs to God. Psalm 124 begins, "If it had not been the Lord who was on our side." The congregation imagines the flood that would have covered it and the trap that would still hold it. Then the song names the broken snare. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. The Creator's greatness appears as help for people who couldn't free themselves. In Psalm 138, that memory takes another voice. The worshipper thanks God for steadfast love, or hesed, and faithfulness. Though the Lord is high, he regards the lowly. Though trouble remains, his right hand preserves life. The final prayer trusts that the Lord will complete his work and asks him not to forsake what his hands have made. Worship keeps mercy from shrinking into a private mood. Israel says the rescue together. Repeated praise trains a community to interpret danger through the character of the God who has already helped. Ezekiel's rebuilt cities belong to a longer promise. Israel has defiled the land through bloodshed and idolatry. Exile has profaned God's name among the nations. The Lord then says that he will act for his holy name, gather the people, cleanse them, give them a heart of flesh, and put his spirit within them. Only after that renewal does the lection show cultivated fields and crowded streets. The land once called desolate becomes like Eden. Neighboring nations see the change and learn that the Lord has spoken and acted. Restoration includes soil, homes, safety, and a living community, but it begins with grace that cleanses and changes the people who return. The immediate promise concerns exiled Israel and Judah's land. Christians later hear its new heart and spirit language within the new covenant, but that canonical development shouldn't erase the people and place named by Ezekiel. Verse 37 joins promise to prayer. God chooses to answer Israel's asking as he fills the ruined cities with people. Divine initiative doesn't make prayer pointless. Grace creates a people able to ask for the future God has promised. Just before Matthew's lection, Jesus feeds 4,000 people in a desolate place. The disciples collect 7 baskets of fragments. Then Pharisees and Sadducees demand a sign from heaven, even though God's work stands before them. In the boat, Jesus warns, "Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees." The disciples have forgotten bread, so bread becomes the only meaning they can hear. Jesus calls them people of little faith and asks whether they remember both feedings. 5 loaves fed 5,000, and 7 fed 4,000. The remaining baskets testify that his provision exceeded the need. Matthew explains that the leaven is teaching. Leaven isn't always a negative symbol in Scripture. Here, the passage names its meaning. The Pharisees and Sadducees differ from one another, yet both resist the truth disclosed in Jesus. Their teaching can spread because it supplies a way of seeing that leaves no room for him. Remembered mercy clears the disciples' vision. Once scarcity stops controlling the conversation, they can hear the warning Jesus actually gave. Providence preserves moral truth because the brother's evil purpose and God's good purpose remain distinct within one history. Joseph then shows what forgiveness looks like when judgment is returned to God. He speaks kindly and supplies food. The promise outlives Joseph. His coffin in Egypt points toward an exodus he won't live to see. Ezekiel makes restoration moral and spiritual as well as material. The Lord cleanses, gives a new heart, puts his spirit within the people, and rebuilds their common life. The renewed people respond by asking God to do what he has pledged. Jesus places this memory inside discipleship. The one who fed the crowds can be trusted with bread, which frees his warning to be heard as a warning about teaching. In Christian canonical reading, the cross gives this hope its fullest form. Human beings intend violence against Christ. God raises him and makes that rejected life the source of salvation. The wound remains a wound, but God's resurrecting mercy denies it authority over the end. Joseph's words should never be used to tell a wounded person that abuse was secretly good. He says the opposite, "You meant evil." Faith begins by telling that truth. God's providence means the offender doesn't own the future, not that the offense deserves a softer name. Joseph also refuses God's place. We can pursue justice and establish boundaries that protect people without making revenge our calling. Forgiveness doesn't require pretending that every relationship is safe. Where care is possible, it should become concrete rather than remaining a religious phrase. Ezekiel asks churches and communities what kind of rebuilding they celebrate. Growth without cleansing can repopulate the same ruins. God's renewal reaches worship, desire, land, work, and shared life. Jesus gives us a practice for discernment. Remember the loaves. Test teaching by the character and work of Christ. Teaching that keeps people trapped in panic or contemptuous self-protection may sound religious while bending sight away from Him. Rehearse God's mercy in prayer and worship until gratitude becomes a way of seeing. Thank you for studying with us today. If this helped you understand the scriptures, please like and subscribe. We'll see you tomorrow.